Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Again, I'm here with my friend Heather Skriba. Heather, thanks so much for being live. Well, not live, but it's recorded on my YouTube channel is just called Preston Sprinkle, but Theology in the Raw is a podcast that I run as well. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
We actually never met. We've got several mutual friends, and we've corresponded on email a little bit, and then you came out to be part of this filming project, and I would just love for you to tell your story, and then we can, I'm sure that's going to spark a bunch of questions, and we can kind of follow up from there. So tell us who Heather Skriba is.
Yeah. So my story, I grew up in like a Christian home, but my mom was Methodist and my dad was Catholic, and so even just between those two like faith denominations, like I got a lot of conflicting messages about like who God is, like what does faith mean. Even just like salvation, like there's two fundamentally different views on salvation between Methodists and Catholics, and so I was just really confused about like what it meant to be a Christian. And my parents got divorced when I was in second grade, and that led to a lot of like family dynamics being really rough. Like my mom was emotionally unavailable, and my dad was physically and emotionally and verbally abusive, and so it led me to like project all of that the negative relationships with my parents onto God too. So like my mom is absent, therefore God is absent. My dad's like abusive and abrasive, and therefore God is too. And
so both parents, not just the father representing dad, but both mother and father shape your view of God.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, like God the Father, but then there's the comfort of the Holy Spirit, and that's the more mothering, nurturing role. And so I missed out on both of those as a kid, and so my view of God was just really, really distorted. But it led me to like not want anything to do with God as a kid. Like I would go to youth group just to keep my parents happy. I would go to church on Sundays to avoid arguments later, but it was never something that I wanted anything to do with. And that continued all throughout like middle school and high school. Like I went through the motions, but I was really turned off to God. Like I didn't want anything to do with him, and I quite frankly just wanted to go to college and start over. Like I wanted to be myself and just like abandon all of this like negative baggage, because like my dad's view of like women and femininity was really narrow, and I just could not meet his expectations of what that was supposed to be like. Like he thought women needed to like have long hair, like to wear dresses, wear makeup, and I like wore camouflage and like played with my brother's G.I. Joes, and so we just had like two fundamentally different perspectives and experiences. And when we would have like tension about it, he would like look at me and say like, I always wish that I had a daddy's girl as a daughter. And what that communicated to my like 8-year-old heart was like, I'm not the daughter that my dad wants. Like being around my femininity or my version of femininity brings my dad pain. Like it's defective, it's not good enough. And I internalized that like as my identity, as my value. So like that caused me to develop a lot of social anxiety, a lot of insecurity, a ton of self-hatred. And so by the time that I turned 18 and was ready to go to school, I was ready to be out. Like I just needed a clean start. So when I got to college, I went to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I was ready to like just really like turn away from any like traditional or conservative like idea from my background, and instead like I wanted to take a women's studies course and expose myself to other like just other worldviews, because like I grew up in small town northern Michigan, like where everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So like just what's out there is really limited.
Yeah.
But on my first day of classes, like Jesus interrupted my story, as he often does, and there was a group of people from a campus ministry handing out surveys, and they were basically saying like, hey, fill out a survey and you get a free discount card. And as a now poor college student, I thought, why not? So like the questions on the survey were really simple. It was like, do you want a personal relationship with God? Are you interested in a Bible study? And maybe one more. And I think I checked like maybe or like sort of interested, but very non-committal answers. But that was enough for them to start reaching out to me. And after like 6 weeks of making excuses for why I couldn't go to like their Bible study and like campus gatherings, I finally like I just didn't have any more excuses. So I thought, okay, I'll go once and then that'll get them off my back. Like, they'll stop calling me every week. But at the like all campus gathering that I went to, the message was called The Music of the Gospel. And the premise of it was, if we're dancing without music, it's exhausting. Like, there's no joy in it. It's like devoid of all like things that are life-giving. But if you hear the music of the gospel, like, things that we normally call religious actually become life-giving and enjoyable. And it's something that you want to invite other people into. And it's something that like builds your faith and builds your joy and increases your quality of life, instead of like something that is just a meaningless act. And I realized that these people had an experience of God that I had never had before. And whatever the different thing was that they had, I wanted that version of God, not the version that I knew growing up. So that propelled me to give my life to Jesus and realize that like there is kindness there. There is kindness in the heart of God. And like I want to experience that like personal like relationship with God that makes me want to dance to the music of the gospel. And after I like became a Christian and started pursuing God and pursuing faith, like I started asking a lot of those apologetic questions that you ask, like, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? Questions about like science and faith and how can those things coexist? Like, are dinosaurs real? How old is the earth? Just those big
all
questions.
the fun ones.
Yeah, you know, and like the woman who was discipling me like just was so patient. It was really sweet of her. She like brought out Josh McDowell's like Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and we went through it together.
Nice.
But then I was also asking these heart level questions of like, why does God let suffering happen to people? Like, why did my like upbringing, why did he let that be so hard? Like, why did I feel so much self-hatred and anxiety and insecurity? Like, these questions that are more personal, and that I had used my pain to distance myself from God. But now that I was in a relationship and like following after him, like we began peeling back those layers. And then one of the areas, like as I was processing through all these things, one of the areas that I got really stuck was about like LGBT issues in the Bible. In my mind, I was thinking like, how could a loving God say that two people loving each other is bad? Like that just felt really arbitrary. Like if he's God, like he could have changed it. He could still change his mind maybe. Like I just couldn't grasp like what was so bad about it or what was wrong about it. And through like being so stuck on, like I was stuck on it for months, probably years even. I realized like I had personal stake in this game. Like I was so stuck on this because it shed light on the fact that like I am holding out on the fact that like I really hope I can date a woman someday. And being in a more like progressive setting and like at a university, like I started to like get vocabulary to talk about like, oh, like I'm attracted to women. Like the church calls that same-sex attraction. This university just like calls it like being gay or being lesbian or whatever like the terminology is. Like there's more flexibility there, and it gave me vocab to talk about it that the church hadn't equipped me with. And like having language is really empowering. And so I finally felt like, oh, there's a word for this, so therefore like someone else had to have struggled with this before. And so as I began opening up to like my Christian community about it, like they were very much like okay with me wrestling with it like on a head level. Like you can wrestle with big picture theology of like what does God say about LGBT stuff in the Bible, but the second it becomes personal and you think about like, can I, Heather, date a woman? They shut that down immediately and they're like, we're not comfortable with this. Like God says no, like we'll pray about it, we'll pray for you, but like there's no freedom to wrestle on a personal level. You can wrestle theologically, but not on a personal level.
And would you say that lack of freedom was really unhelpful, not having that space? I mean,
totally unhelpful. Like there, like isn't like the name like Jacob or Israel something means to wrestle with God, and so it's like that's like fundamentally built into like what it means to be in relationship with him, and they like that was just being quenched. And so, yeah, it was super unhelpful. Okay. because I wasn't able to address those questions in my like faith community, it's like I'm gonna ask those questions anyway, so I'll just go somewhere else since like I'm not getting answers from from the people that I want to get answers from. So I began talking to some just like friends that I had made in classes, at work, just opening up like, hey, like I kind of think I might be attracted to women, and the response that I got was the complete opposite. Like they were excited. They're like, yes, like we get to be part of your coming out story. Like we get to be part of this like new step in your life and you becoming authentically you. And I was like, wow, like that is way more of the reaction that I was hoping for. Just even like the acceptance of like, this is not something like shameful.
Right.
Like I didn't want to be even like I would never ask someone to change their theology just to make me feel better, but to engage me in dialogue about it is so freeing, and to not even have that with my faith community, like just like piles shame onto it.
Yeah, you had almost two extreme communities here. One's just completely affirming, no wrestling at all, just we can't wait till you come out. The other one, no freedom to genuinely wrestle. What do you think a healthy, maybe, I don't want to say middle ground, but kind of, is there, what would it look like for a Christian community who maybe does believe in a traditional sexual ethic, still provide healthy space for somebody to wrestle so that you're not just like completely turned off by that community, you're just going to go find some other place to wrestle?
Yeah. I think like Christians often feel like theology needs to be weaponized to keep someone's behavior in place and like on the right track. And so like if people hadn't led with theology, I think it would have communicated something totally different.
Wow.
Like, because for me, even if I knew what most of their perspectives were, but if they even just switched their response and said, wow, like I know that's a hard thing to like process as a Christian, like are you okay? Like that's asking if someone is okay isn't sacrificing any of your beliefs or values. It's caring for someone. Like just think about the story of the Good Samaritan. Like they crossed over the road to check on the person who was wounded. Like you have to like overcome those like barriers and like the discomfort and like even the inconvenience of loving people. Like overcome that to make people feel safe. And it's uncomfortable. Yeah. And it's awkward and it's messy and quite frankly, like, I mean, most of the time I don't want to do that. So, like let me stay in my comfortable little box, but like that doesn't, like when people's hearts are on the line, it's worth it. Yeah, totally.
So you wrestled with your sexuality in college. When did that turn into a wrestling with your gender identity?
Yeah.
Was it shortly after? Or?
It was my senior year of college, so I stayed like I came out to like Christian friends as like same-sex attracted because that's like the safe word to use. But I thought that like just coming out as that would be enough, like letting people know like this is my experience, and if you're gonna judge me, like maybe you're not someone I want in my life anyway. So I tried to ride that tension for a while. But my summer before my senior year of college, my mental health was declining a lot. Like I was really struggling with anxiety and depression. I had been on antidepressants for a little bit and they stopped working, and I cycled through like 3 or 4 different ones, and they still like I just kept responding poorly to all of them. And so I finally was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't live in this tension because it is taking a toll on my ability to like show up to life. I was calling into work multiple times a week. I was really struggling to even get out of bed, and just the any joy that I had in life was just quenched because this feeling of like I just need to come out, and like it felt like I was being smothered by how much I was thinking about and perseverating on my sexuality and my gender. And so the summer before my senior year of college, I came out as gay for about 3 months, and like that eased up a little bit of the tension, but it wasn't quite the right fit. Like something about it was like, this is nice, but like there's more to it than what I should be experiencing. Like this isn't quite right. And in a lot of just in like growing as a believer and processing through, and just like maturing and processing through a lot of like issues from my childhood, I was working on going through a lot of my resentments, and I realized like I resented my parents a lot, I resented myself a lot, but I also resented God a lot. And a lot of my resentments that came up were about sexuality. But in taking that like moral inventory, I realized, oh, like there's a lot here about my gender too. Like I'm really mad at God that he made me a woman.
Wow.
And I don't know what to do with that. But like realizing that made me have a little bit more like, I feel a little bit more empowered to like, okay, at least I have a category for this now. But in those conversations about gender, again, like the church or my faith community was not a safe place for that. So as I opened up to like my other friends, their response was, you don't have to live with this inner tension that's causing you to feel so like anxious and depressed and on the verge of suicidal. Like you don't have, like you deserve better than that. And so I decided that my senior year of college, I was going to introduce myself by a new name. So I started going by Jamie. I started using male pronouns, and I really switched my wardrobe. Like before that summer, I had this last dramatic shift towards like trying to be feminine. Like I was trying to wear makeup and jewelry and dresses, and it was just
How'd that go?
not well. It just felt like really awkward. I was like, I'm looking at myself, and I just constantly am so uncomfortable in my body, and like these clothes are just making it worse. So the shift after I came out in my classes, like I was thinking, I can introduce myself here. The semester's 4 months long. If this doesn't go how I'm assuming it will go, like I'm probably never going to see the people in my class again. So like it felt like a good trial period for it. Not that I made the decision lightly, but just knowing that I had an out, I think made the weight of the decision a lot less.
Yeah. Did people accept you, I mean, in your environment as Jamie, or did you feel any kind of awkward responses or, you know?
It depended on the class. Like I was taking a lot of, it was my senior year, so I was in a lot of upper level psych and sociology classes. So when I'm taking classes like the sociology of gender, part of the protocol is introducing yourself and saying your preferred pronouns. Okay. So the classes that were more like progressive, for lack of a better word, created a space where like I could experiment with that, or I could like come out, and even though like I still like I wasn't changing that much permanently at that point, but it still was a space where that was respected.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how long after did you begin transitioning? Yeah.
It took me, when I started changing my name, like the relief that I felt, like it wasn't like instantaneous, but it was really quick.
Okay.
Like it took maybe a month for me to start feeling like confident and comfortable, and to notice like I'm actually like engaging people again. Like I'm laughing, I'm having fun, I'm being silly and playful, and like these parts of my personality are coming out that I thought were like dead, honestly.
You say that's just a name change.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful for someone who doesn't have the experience to understand, because oftentimes people who don't wrestle with gender dysphoria, who are perfectly fine with, you know, my male name and being a male, but like to understand somebody like in your case, so much like anxiety and just depression and all this stuff leading up to it, and then finding that relief from the name. And then if a Christian comes along, or not just a Christian, but if somebody comes along and refuses to use that name, it's almost like another punch in the gut, right? Yeah. It's like you're taking away something that has brought me relief. Right or wrong, you know, whatever you think about the name thing, like that's the feeling I imagine.
Yeah.
It's like you're taking away something that's finally brought me some relief.
Yeah, and for me, it was just this white noise in the background. Like when I was going by Heather and female pronouns and trying to like look feminine, like there was this constant white noise of, this isn't right, I'm not doing this right, this feels wrong, like how do I make myself feel okay about this? And it's just this narrative that plays in the background. And it was like it's like someone turned off the power of the white noise, like it muted it when I finally started switching like my name and pronouns, or even just turn the volume down a little bit, because it wasn't gone. But then the second like that gets questioned, or I have to like make a choice about what bathroom I was going to use. Like the white noise went back up of like, am I going to be found out? Like, is someone going to tell me I'm in the wrong bathroom? Am I going to get called ma'am instead of sir? And it's just this constant like internal tornado that does not stop.
I've heard from, I think, every single trans person I've talked to that go like the whole the turmoil that they go through when they have to go to the bathroom in public. Just the which one do I go in? What's going to happen? Just the anxiety of having to use the bathroom in public is just constant.
Yeah, and there's the argument that it's like for like even just the thought that it would be for like other people's safety is just so baffling to me, because it's like I'm more worried about this, and I'm the one who's more at risk as like like as a trans guy than anybody else in this bathroom. And like I just honestly really just want to use the bathroom. Like it's not that deep, but we're making it like it's been made into this thing. Like wars are waged in the bathrooms.
Does it make you feel like a monster? I mean, it's like, wait, what, do you think I'm gonna harm somebody or something? Is that when they use that kind of rhetoric? I mean, is that?
I wouldn't say monster. It more of like just made me feel really on edge. Like I like was on guard all the time. Like I had to make sure that like I would avoid eye contact with people, because maybe that would make them pay more attention to me, or just how can I fly under the radar as much as possible and just like go to the bathroom and then be done and like go on with my life. But like no one should have to think about it that much.
What about, so I would say the people, at least the more thoughtful people I know, when they raise concerns about the bathroom thing, it's not even really they're concerned as much, at least the ones I would talk to about a trans person using a bathroom that matches their gender. It's more somebody else, some straight cisgender pervert taking advantage of that, you know. And I guess, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It just like grieves me that is a segue for like talking about like perverts or pedophilia or anything. Like those are two totally different conversations. Like someone who is going to like do anything harmful or in a bathroom is going to do that regardless of whether or not like trans people are allowed to use the bathroom that they want. Like that motive already exists, and if someone is motivated enough to act on that, like the gender or like the sign on a bathroom is not going to stop them.
That's good. So. Okay, so you socially transition, and then you start after that. How long after when you started taking hormones?
It was, classes started September. It was December that I finally got on hormones.
Okay.
In that time, I was like really hoping that God would like close doors if I wasn't supposed to be doing it. But it took 6 weeks to make a doctor's appointment, when in reality it should have taken months. And so I started hormones that December, and I was on them for probably like 2 years total. But in the first few months, like my voice started dropping, like my body fat redistributed. So like my face got a little bit elongated, and like my like muscle mass shifted. So it just like kind of became more and more like appearing more and more like a cisgender guy, to the point where I could pass, which means to have people perceive me as the gender I want them to. So like I was trying to look masculine, or I was identifying as a transgender guy, and people were perceiving me as such. And so I was passing, and that was really when I felt like things were like, I was like, this is good. Like this is just alleviating so much of that distress. Like, and I can I just saw so many of the initial like good changes continue to magnify as I began to look more and more masculine.
Okay.
So then I pursued changing my name legally, and I changed my gender marker legally. Like I did all the things that you like typically do to fully socially transition.
Okay. And was that satisfying? I mean, did it scratch the itch that you felt like needed to be scratched?
In the beginning, yeah. Like it ended up, obviously it ended up not sticking because I'm here as Heather, but like in the beginning, yeah, I think like I was just, there was so much going on. Like I had this community that loved me and championed me. Like I found a place to belong. I found my identity, and there, like I felt so much freedom from shame, because like in the LGBT community, there's no shame for being transgender. It's celebrated. So like the big things that like I was looking for answers on, like am I loved, am I accepted, is the way that I'm made good, like those core questions were being answered. And so with the momentum that I had, I was thinking like this has all been so awesome. Like the last thing that I need to do to like alleviate this dysphoria that I'm feeling is to have top surgery. Because so often for like trans guys, like that is the thing that that is the thing that like helps you like not fix your dysphoria, that's not a good use of language, but like helps you alleviate your dysphoria more permanently, like because it's like the most permanent change on your body.
Most trans guys that I talk to say that their chest is kind of the way you would describe like the source of their dysphoria almost, you know.
Yeah, because I was binding up until I had surgery, but there was always like this awkwardness with it of like, is the shirt that I'm wearing showing that I'm binding? Like, are there telltale signs that I am transgender? And they're also just uncomfortable. Like, there's just so many factors that like that binding versus like having top surgery, like the difference in the amount of dysphoria it alleviates is significant.
So after you've had top surgery, tell us about the months after that. Did it help? Was it, scratch that itch that you've been trying to scratch?
The leading up to it, I started to get a little nervous, but I just assumed that was because I was engaging in massive life change. Like I was gonna
any surgery, right? Would produce
right. Yeah. So like my voice had dropped, and I could there are women who have voices as low as mine. Like that's not totally out of the question. But surgery was permanent. Like there's no going back and having things be the same. And so I think just the gravity of it started to hit me. But after surgery, when I saw my chest for the first time, I just remembered having this sinking feeling of oh, this is not what I was hoping it would be. Like this was supposed to be soul level care and soul level satisfaction, and this is just on the surface. Like this is just trying to modify my body to deal with a soul level heartache. And so from there, I saw my dysphoria shift to non-gendered parts of my body. So my arms, my legs, my stomach. And I realized that it wasn't just a hatred of my gender and a discomfort in my gender that I was processing through. It was a discomfort in who I was as a person. It wasn't just I don't like being a woman. It was I don't like being me. I don't like who I am, and I don't like be who I am around other people, and I don't like being stuck alone with myself.
Yeah. So one thing as I've heard you share your story, one thing I really appreciate is you constantly emphasize that this is your story. You don't want to make your story prescriptive or even descriptive of all the other stories. I really appreciate that. So in your story, just to kind of reiterate, maybe draw out something you just said about you felt like you were you needed soul care, and you were addressing it with kind of physical or more surfacey things. Can you maybe elaborate on what was the kind of soul care you were really needing through all this? As
I began, after surgery, I saw my behavior beginning to spiral. So I just saw myself obsessively exercising and obsessively watching what I was eating, trying to obtain this perfect body. And so when I look back and I'm what was my soul longing for? And I feel just the rest of knowing that I was okay as I was, that there was delight in me for sheerly existing, not that didn't have to be attained through any sort of perfectionism or trying to control things but Heather is okay. Heather is good. Heather is wonderful. And no amount of trying to destroy the identity of Heather and create a new one is going to shift the fact that my soul, even though I was living as Jamie, I can't erase the past as Heather. And there's still this part of me that just really needed to know that this part of my past, this person that I really didn't like she was okay. And there's just this little girl Heather that when I look back and think about it, there's this little girl Heather who just is looking for love and looking to be cared for and looking to be nurtured. And as an adult, I was dealing with those feelings through transitioning, through obsessively exercising and drinking and all of these things. But at the end of the day, it was this tired, lonely, really hurt little girl who just like needed love.
Wow. Yeah. So was it like two years later you decided, or no, it wasn't just you decided, God was really truly leading you to re-identify as Heather. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, so it was actually pretty shortly after having top surgery. So I had top surgery February of 2017. And then it was that May that God started like interrupting things again. So after surgery and just the like full body dysphoria, not just gender dysphoria, like that prompted me to start looking back to like what God was saying. So because the answer that I had gotten from like my friends just from school or like my non-Christian friends, I guess, was that like transitioning would satisfy me and that would alleviate, like, because it really is the only like solution for people struggling with gender dysphoria. Like the church doesn't really have a comparable option, and I tried that and it didn't work, and so I was like, I guess I'll go back to church. So I emailed some churches and I was very direct with them. I just said, I'm a trans guy, I want to be part of the children's ministry, worship team, and a life group, and like, if you're not okay with that, just please tell me now, because if I don't want to get 6 months down the road and have you realize that I'm trans and get kicked out. So there's this one church in Ann Arbor that was just awesome. Like they were really upfront with me about what they believed. They said like, most people in our church believe that if you're born a female, like you should identify as a woman, but like we're all just like in need of Jesus, and so welcome to our family. Like you, even if like we disagree, like you still have value, like you still have insight and gifts from the Holy Spirit that like we want to learn from. So like come, like let us learn from you, and like hopefully you can learn from us too. And then at the same time, I was looking online, trying to find resources about like what it meant to be a man and woman. And I found this ministry that was describing like the core desires of a woman's heart, and one of them was to be delighted in, and that just hit my heart like so deeply, because it was like, oh my gosh, like yes, that is what I'm looking for, and all of this, like I just want to know that like I'm loved. Like it sounds so simple, and yet like it's not. Like it's so simple, and yet it's so messy, and we live in a broken world, and I realized that like I identified so much with what they define a core desire of a woman's heart to be. Like maybe I need to start rethinking through like my gender. And in that time, like I had plans, like I gotten a scholarship to law school, and I had planned to go attend that fall, and I was starting to learn how to like hear God's voice again, and I felt like he said to turn down the scholarship. I was like, that's crazy, God, like this is like a full ride to law school, like that, I don't think you understand what you're doing. But I knew that I was hearing from God, and so I turned down the scholarship. And the next day, God asked me a few questions. Like he asked me, like, why are you settling for your brokenness? And I mean, even just specifically relating to gender, I was like, that I just thought like, I have been operating out of a place of woundedness, like my femininity, viewing it as wounded, like I just shoved it to the corner. Like, yeah, I don't have to look at it or deal with it, but like it's also causing me to like just to engage the world out of this place of feeling like there's part of me that's defective, and this is all covering that up. And then he asked me like, don't you know that I offer wholeness? And I was just honest with him. I was like, God, no, I don't. So like, will you please prove it to me? And I think as Christians, like it's really easy to feel shame when we say like, God, no, I don't actually believe that you say the things that you believe. But the ability to be honest with him in that, like for like just changed the trajectory of what my heart was willing to like receive.
God's not afraid of our doubts.
Right? Like he's so confident in who he is that like our doubts, like I feel like if he like wants to give us, and he has given us such a big picture, but like when he's not like angry at us when we doubt, it's like, oh Heather, like here you go again, like don't you know that I love you? Like I do, so I'm gonna show you again.
So good.
Yeah.
Can you help us make sense of, like in the last 10 years, there's been just such a massive increase, especially among teenage females, either wrestling with their gender identity or identifying as male, or maybe another an alternative gender identity. I mean, and it's interesting because it's largely females. Like typically males would be slightly higher on the gender dysphoria scale, but then the last 10 years there's been like a hockey stick rise in females. Have you thought of that, or help us make sense of why that may be? Is there something in the culture with femininity that's confusing people, or I don't know?
I would have to think about it more too, but my initial, like, I think part of it is there's always been more flexibility with femininity in some ways, like, because of like toxic masculinity, like men have to make a much more significant coming out story to like identify as trans or even as gay, because like there's so much more, like has to be so much more intentional. Whereas like we our culture has for a long time accepted that of course a woman wants to be more masculine, like we prize masculinity above femininity, and so like it makes sense to us that like, and it's more accepting to us that like women want to like take a step up, whereas men coming out are taking a step down
because of the imbalance, the hierarchy within oh wow, that's interesting.
So I think I feel like there's been more flexibility there anyway. My initial response is that like there's just more access to vocabulary to name it as gender dysphoria, or to name like that pushback against stereotypes, that like there's more ability to not be in secret about it. But I think our culture has always been one that's been set up of like, of course women want to be like men.
Or even the idea like if you're a tomboy, that's not that negative.
Yeah.
But to be a sissy boy or whatever, whatever the male equivalent, that is, it's very negative, right? Yeah. So there is, like you said, there is more flexibility within gender expression with females. A couple more questions.
Sure.
Like I could talk to you forever, but what would you say to maybe parents who have a child or teenager who's wrestling with their gender identity? Maybe they actually have like really severe dysphoria, or maybe they're just, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but just confused, like genuinely confused about who they are. What help would you give to parents who are trying to parent their child through that?
A lot of the parents that I've met with, I think initially believe that it's something that they've done that's caused their child to experience dysphoria. Like, did we raise them too strictly? Were we not strict enough? Like, did we give bad images about masculinity and femininity? And so, first and foremost, I just like hope that parents listening to this can just like ease that pressure off themselves. Like, there's so much that we don't know about what causes gender dysphoria. Like, is it nurture versus nature? Is it biological? Is it like having such strong stereotypes in the culture? It's probably a combination of all of the above. And so like easing off that pressure and then choosing to ask good questions without trying to fix your child's gender dysphoria. Like when I was really starting to talk about it and feel it more, like I was in my 20s at the time, so it's different than having younger kids, but I wish people didn't focus so much on the solution, but focused more on just understanding my experience. So like, what is your gender dysphoria like? Like, what things bring it on more? What things help you what things help like make you feel more relaxed, like help ease it? Like, what does it, like, is it really loud, or is it like a constant humdrum noise in the background? Just like trying to get a feel for what my experience was. Because you can't walk with people through things until you have an understanding of what it's like.
That's so true. Oh my gosh, yeah. And what about, I guess more broadly to the church? How would you like to see the church improve in how it engages specifically the transgender conversation? And also, number two, what would it look like for a church to cultivate, I'll say, healthy spaces for people to work through their gender identity?
Yeah, I think for churches, like, it has to start at the top. Like, so it's going to be different for every church, but like the leadership has to begin engaging this conversation as a team first, and like understanding choosing the act, like it's an active choice to choose to defend like LGBT individuals in their church. Like one thing that made me feel really safe in my church back in Ann Arbor was they were willing to lose like heterosexual congregants over my like letting me be part of the church, because they knew like they're going to have no trouble finding a new church, but like you as an LGBT individual, you are going to have a nightmare time finding a church that's going to love you.
Wow.
So they prioritized my spiritual well-being, knowing, not saying I'm more important, but knowing that like the resources for me are far fewer. And so like they prioritized that, but that was a choice from that the leadership made of like, we're going to make this a priority. Okay. And then that trickled into like just the heart posture of the congregation too. And even, I think too, like even just knowing like how are we talking about gender in the really subtle ways too, like are like men's and women's times or like youth group events, like are the men going and like eating wings and playing sports and like watching, I don't know, like action movies, and are the women like drinking tea and crafting? Like of course I want to be like playing sports, but somehow that misaligned with what the church was saying women need to be like. So it was very boxed in my experience. Like women do this and this is how women connect with God. Men do this and this is how men connect with God. But God looks at us as individuals. Like no two women are the same. So I like would love churches to begin like having this heart posture of like, okay, what does Heather need to connect with God? Like what does Preston need to connect with God? Like as a man or as a woman, but like as like masculinity in like your version of masculinity or femininity in my version. Because that might be like being outside, going in nature, playing sports. That could be crafting. Crafting's great, but like to have those blanket statements over an entire gender is really suffocating.
It's almost like you implicitly moralize a certain stereotype.
Yeah.
And even, let's just say 70%, let's just say 80% women would rather be crafting, and I don't think that's true actually, but would rather be crafting than eating wings and playing, dodgeball or something. What does that do to the other 20 or 30%?
Right.
Like there's some, and it's not just like, oh, they feel like they're not part of the majority. They actually begin to question, right, the very essence of who they are as a woman. Like I am not honoring God in my womanhood because I don't like these things that apparently define what it means to be a woman.
Yeah, and like even thinking about like whether it is only 1%, like God still goes after, leaves the 99 to go after the 1. And like I want the church to like leave the 99 who love like these more stereotypical masculine and feminine things for the 1%, like one who like needs to know specifically that it's okay that you don't like these things. Your value is, and your femininity does not reside in like your preferences, in like the length of your hair, but it resides in the fact that like God calls you a daughter, and that's what matters. All of the preferences and stuff, like God has given those to you to make you unique and to make you special, because like someone needs your unique giftings somewhere, sometime. Like those are going to like be used for the kingdom.
Yeah, so good. Heather, thanks so much for being on my YouTube channel. Do you have any final words for our audience as they continue to think through this really important discussion?
I mean, I just would love to encourage everyone, like, don't be afraid to ask questions, like, to engage people in where they are. Like, the things that made me feel the most loved were people just asking, wanting to get to know my experience. Like, awesome. And that, like, you can never go wrong with that.
That's so good, so good. Well, thanks so much for being on, and we will see you next time on the show.
Sweet.
Thanks so much.
No problem.
Awesome.